All right, we're in the garden. It's a beautiful day out. We're kind of pushed to the edge of the garden in the shade because it's like really warm. It's like 30 degrees. Uh and I can't record this in the sun. So here we are. Um but I really thought that it was time to have this conversation, and it's probably going to make you really uncomfortable because it makes me really uncomfortable. But I also just think that now is like there's no better time to talk about it. I haven't really seen very many channels talk about it because it does affect us here on the homestead a lot. And I've mentioned it sort of briefly in some of my other videos when we have had issues with wildfire smoke. If the background behind me is like, smoggy or smoky, I will point that out. But I really thought that I would just like let you folks know just what we're doing on the homestead in terms of climate change, specifically where wildfire smoke is concerned and where wildfires themselves are concerned. So we're going to focus on individual action today. I love collective action, but I'll maybe make another video explaining sort of what we can do collectively. But for this video, I'm just going to be focusing on what we are doing and can do as individuals to help to just protect ourselves from wildfire smoke and wildfires, because this has really just this has been the reality of living in Western Canada for the last probably 5 to 7 years. Wildfire smoke has been, you know, quite significant, and it's a problem that is not going to go away ever, and it's only going to get worse. And so climate change is something that we think about here on the homestead a lot, and that's because we witness it a lot on the homestead. Wildfires and wildfire smoke, they're huge issues. Flooding and landslides are huge issues. Like every single year within our vicinity, even if it's not happening directly to us, there's something. There's wildfire, there's landslides, there's droughts, there's floods, there's this and that. I was afraid that was a horsefly because I got bit by a horsefly a couple weeks ago. I got it on footage actually. So, with the wildfire smoke that is coming from Canada to the United States, I've been really seeing a lot of stuff on TikTok about the wildfire smoke. Specifically, I think a lot of Americans reacting to the wildfire smoke, because I don't think that many Americans, I think that some Americans have experienced wildfires and wildfire smoke similar to what we have here in Western Canada. So if you are an American and you have experienced or are experiencing wildfire smoke or have experienced wildfire smoke or wildfires before this year, like definitely let me know. I want to hear your stories. But here in Western Canada, for the last 5 to 7 years, wildfire smoke has been like a really big thing. I noticed it when I worked back in Calgary and I worked outside. I worked with kids and I did summer day camps. And when I first started doing summer day camps, I'm 33 now. So when I first started doing summer day camps for my first couple of years, wildfire smoke was like not a thing. Like we didn't have any air quality advisories, like not a thing. Come my third year, that's when things really started changing. And then, of course, from then on, wildfire smoke became more and more of an issue, now to the point where obviously this year is, I think, set to be the worst Canadian wildfire season, like, on record. But anyway, that's a different story. So as an individual, we'll talk about wildfire smoke first, then we will talk about actual wildfires and what we can do to protect ourselves as individuals. Not talking about collective action. Maybe if you folks want to hear more about some collective action that we can and definitely should be taking, I'll do another video on it, but individual today. So I would say that the number one thing that you can do to protect yourself from wildfire smoke is to be rich. That's it. Just be rich. Now, climate change is gonna come for us all. We all know that. But if you want to mitigate the costs or mitigate the effects of wildfire smoke, be rich. Live in a house. You know, what they advise here in Canada, if there's wildfire smoke days, is don't be homeless. And if you are homeless, well, good luck. And but the advisories here in Canada are to stay inside as much as possible on very, very smoky days. So that's what we'll do on the homestead. We have air conditioners, right? So this ties back into the be rich part, right? So buy an air conditioner for your house. If you can't afford to air condition your entire house, I live in 150 square feet, so it's much easier for me to air condition my house. I do not have an AC unit hooked up in the tiny house right now because we've been extremely lucky. We've had very little smoke this year so far. So I don't need an AC unit currently, but if later this year or next year or whatever it gets really, really smoky, I'll be hooking up my AC unit. So have an AC unit. Don't go outside. If you need to go outside, avoid like strenuous activity, right? So number one, if you are looking to mitigate the wildfire smoke for yourself, be rich. So some of the things that we do here on the homestead, or at least that I do, is I don't have an air filter or anything in the tiny house, although maybe that is potentially something I should invest in because I do heat with wood. So but anyway, if you have a furnace, like any sort of forced air furnace, change out your furnace filters regularly. Same with your vehicle. If you have a vehicle, change out your filters there regularly, as well as if you have a cabin air filter. So in my car, I have an engine air filter and a cabin air filter. So change out those regularly. That's pretty much all we do here on the homestead to protect ourselves against wildfire smoke. We avoid hard exercise. If we do need to do some work here on the homestead, that's like hard work, like, chainsawing or something, which I can't chainsaw in this weather anyway. So, but if it is a really smoky day and I need to get some chainsawing done, we do wear N95 masks, just in case. Generally, we don't worry too much about masking unless the air quality is terrible. Like, what we saw in New York, for example, or we're seeing sort of all across Canada, like every day, they're basically picking a city that has the worst air quality in the world. Like if your skies are just orange, I would recommend probably wearing an N95 mask, or you can actually contact your local fire department and ask your local fire department. Firefighters will know the sort of best thing for the average Joe to do to protect yourselves against wildfire smoke. I actually responded to another homesteader on TikTok just today about what about crops? What about gardens? Yes, wildfire smoke can absolutely affect your crop in your garden. The unfortunate thing here in Western Canada, or here in Canada, and really all across Canada, because pretty much all of Canada is on fire this year, is that's going to affect the quality of our food. But there's not much we can really do about it because there's not really very many places, both in Canada and in the United States, that are not affected by wildfire smoke. So, for us here on the homestead, we still eat all of our produce. That is, even if it's affected by wildfire smoke, unless the taste is so off that it's like inedible, which is like, that I have not had that happen so far. But the honest reality is that I would much rather eat my own produce here, which we don't use any sort of sprays. All of our produce that we produce here on the homestead is all organic. So I would personally rather eat my own stuff from my own garden, even if it is a little bit affected by wildfire smoke, rather than buying from a large industrial farm that is also affected by wildfire smoke, right? So that's kind of your choice. And so if you're, producing wine, for example, right, the taste of your wine. So because of the wildfire smoke this year, we are probably going to see an increase in things like wine prices because all of the wineries from this year that what they're probably going to end up doing is they're probably going to end up making vodka out of their grapes this year, because it'll be so tainted by wildfire smoke that, we won't be able to produce likely a wine crop this year. So if you buy, wine from an area that is affected by wildfire smoke, just kind of be aware that you may not be able to get, 2023 wines. And so that's just it. Otherwise, we still eat all of our own garden and all of our crops. So basically, in terms of protecting yourself from wildfire smoke, that's essentially it. Just be rich, buy products that help you stay inside, wear N95 masks. Now, protecting ourselves here on the homestead from wildfires is a little bit different, but very similar to protecting ourselves from, the actual smoke. The number one tool that we have in terms of wildfire protection right now is insurance. And so insurance is, again, this ties back to just be rich, because insurance here in Western Canada is becoming way more expensive as wildfires get worse and worse and worse, as more towns burn down. Many, insurance institutions are denying people's coverage. And so for us, it's very, 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 very important for us that we make sure that we have adequate coverage to cover all of the buildings, all of the outbuildings, my tiny house on the property, so that, if a wildfire, if and when, we're really anticipating when, we are anticipating in our lifetime, likely, that a wildfire will rip through our property some point in our life. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, right? We don't want to kid ourselves here on the homestead that it's not going to happen, because there's a very high possibility that it will happen. With that being said, the area behind our property actually just burned a couple of years ago, and the good news about that burning is that it won't burn again anytime soon, so fingers crossed. But that doesn't apply directly to our property. Our property is still a giant tinderbox. So insurance is like the number one tool that we use right now to protect ourselves from wildfire smoke. Not only is it becoming more expensive, it's becoming more difficult to get insurance, and claims could potentially be denied, right? So insurance, number one thing. And I think that going forward, if you are looking to protect yourselves against, wildfires or floods or landslides or, the various effects of climate change, insurance should be like crucial to have, and make sure that you have appropriate insurance as well. Otherwise, in terms of forest fires, some of the things that we do here on the property are we are in the process of managing our forest. It doesn't look like it right now, because as I'm looking behind the camera, there's like piles of stuff everywhere that we need to deal with. But we do own a chipper, and what we will do is we try not to leave. Are there any piles behind me in your shot? There's no piles behind me, because this is our garden. But just behind the camera, there's like a whole bunch of piles of branches and whatnot from, my parents are building their house, right? So, we had to cut some trees down, and then you have to buck them, and et cetera, right? So we have piles kind of everywhere right now, but we try and get rid of those piles as fast as we can. We use our chipper for that. So we try not to leave any piles around that could just be, a tinderbox, basically, right, in your forest. And so we do try and chip up those piles. And then what we do with the piles that we have chipped is we'll use them for various things. We use the chips in the chicken coop, which I've talked about once before. We will also use the chips to line our pathways. Just be aware, do not put wood chips anywhere near your house, because again, it just fire. Pathway of fire right to your house. Basically, wood chips are just pathways of fire. So just don't put it around your house. You'll probably be all right. But we don't want any of these piles around. So we do try and do that. We do try and also manage our forest as well, at least the areas directly around the house. So we try and really look and see, are there fallen dead trees leaning against other trees? because those dead trees are just going to act like, like ladders for the fire to climb, up onto the canopy of the trees, and then your whole forest is burned down. While our forest management isn't perfect, especially because my parents are building this year and blah, 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 these are things that we also need to keep in mind. I'm also in the process of learning more about forestry management. So if you are a forestry management professional, like, please give us some advice on how to manage our forest. Our forest was clear cut, whatever, 100 or 150 years ago. It was not aerial seeded. It was seeded naturally. So the health of our forest is a little bit better than maybe some other forests, but it's not perfect. And I know that. So we try and manage our forest for forest fire and for health. My tiny house is in the forest. So another thing that Fire Smart BC actually recommends, they have really great recommendations, but what they recommend is they recommend actually cutting down all of the trees within a certain radius of your property. Now, in terms of mitigating climate change, there are pros and cons to doing that. My tiny house is literally in the forest, okay? I didn't cut any trees down. The con, of course, is that it's a tinderbox. Like, my tiny house is probably going to burn down if a fire rips through here. However, the pro is that I have a lot of shade. My tiny house stays cool, and I don't need the use of AC or anything like that, right? So, pros and cons. Do you keep trees around your house? Yes and no. I unfortunately have a lot of cedar around my tiny house as well, and that cedar really likes to light on fire. So there is a bit of that. But we do try and manage our forest as best as we can. And I will keep you folks updated on more things that we start doing to our forest to try and manage it for wildfires. Because, this is just going to be an ongoing conversation. And finally, the final thing that we try and do is we do try and keep water on the property for as long as possible. So we actually have a little pond that's like this way down the hill. It's actually by our other house. We have this adorable little pond that will help a lot if a wildfire comes down, because fire is not going to generally, I hope, jump over a pond. And we are working on keeping water on the property. Like in spring times, we have this massive flooding where water just rushes off the property. So we're really working every single year to mitigate that flooding and create seasonal ponds or whatever needs to happen. So that we can keep as much water on our property for as long as possible. We basically just don't want water to just rush off of our property. The more water we have on our property, the better it will be for, forest fire kind of prevention. So yeah, I think that's about it when talking about wildfire smoke and then wildfires. I was going to do 2 separate videos for this, but then I was like, no, we're going to just do one. I haven't really given you folks an update on what's happening around the property, and I don't really want to wait until next week because I don't know if I will have, I don't know what's going to happen. We are now in the visitor apocalypse of the summer. So last year I actually stopped recording pretty much all summer because I was so busy with the tiny house, and also we had visitors all summer. And so we currently do have visitors now. My uncle is here with my cousin, and it's started. Basically, we just have visitors all summer, which is great. I love it. I love to see them, but it makes it difficult when I'm working, at my day job, and then I also have visitors all summer. It's difficult to keep up with making YouTube content. So hopefully, I do not fall by the wayside this year. So I'm going to give you an update on what we're doing around the property because it's actually super fun. So the biggest thing that I have to tell you about is that we, over the last 2 days, 2 days, we have actually been drilling for water on our property. So the best way I can describe it is the area where my tiny house is. You all know that I was living off grid for a while, right? We didn't have any services. There was no power. Now there's power. We brought power in, and now we are also drilling for water. So we're drilling a well, and we finally found water today, which is great. And I actually want to do another video about homesteading and the potential costs of homesteading, especially if you're planning on not living off the grid. Like, for example, if you want fresh water on your property, like we do. Because they found water today, but it is not cheap. It costs $10 a foot, and we found water at, I think, 470 feet, 450 feet, 470 feet. So $4,500, $45,000, not 4,500, $45,000 later, we have water. And they don't have as much water as they would like. By they, I mean the drillers. They wanted 5 gallons of water, but they only got 3 or 3.5, I think, which is fine. Like 3.5 is apparently plenty to sustain one house and my tiny house, because my tiny house doesn't take anything because it's not hooked up to any sort of water and will never be. So the water is the biggest update I have for you folks. So that's really exciting. The crow, I'll give you an update on the crow situation. So the crow seems to be fine. So a couple weeks ago, I was sort of posting about this crow that had fallen out of its nest on our property. So it stayed on our property for about a week or two. We didn't touch it. Mama was still feeding it and everything like that, and it seemed to be fine. Its wing, like I don't know if its wing was injured or if it just was too little to fully fly yet. I think maybe it was too little to fully fly yet, but its foot was injured. And so it eventually learned how to fly, but it couldn't really stay into trees because of its injured foot. So it still kind of hung around. It was actually quite aggressive, which was good because, we didn't feed it or handle it or anything. So it being aggressive is probably a good thing. It chased both humans and dogs. My mom got chased by it, and my dog got chased by it. So, but anyway, that crow is, as far as I know, living around my property. It has a very distinctive caw, and I do hear it once in a while. So crow seems to be fine. I just posted on TikTok. I have a little frog friend that lives on my deck, and I think it's helping to keep the mosquitoes away because the mosquitoes on my deck are insane. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. I'm just still the floor of the loft of the tiny house, which is another ongoing project. There's just so many. I will not be finishing the floor of the loft in the tiny house until the fall time now, because it's too hot to work in the tiny house, and I don't want to do that anyway. And that's a perfect fall/winter time project, when my wood stove is running, blah, 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 blah. I want to do another video about harvesting firewood and specifically seasoning firewood as well, because we're getting into the end of June now, start of July, and I've been harvesting firewood all spring, but I may still have to order a cord because what I harvested is not ready to burn. It may be ready to burn by the fall. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll see. It's just, these ongoing things. So anyway, if you folks have any questions, or if you have any other suggestions on how to prevent or protect yourself against wildfire smoke or wildfires, if you have a homestead somewhere in Canada or the United States or wherever, I know there's some folks that watch us from Europe as well. How do you protect against wildfire smoke and wildfire itself? I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I will see you folks next week.